Seeing more joys and sorrows shared, thinking of all of those beloved ones who took great risk, served in armed forces for values greater than oneself. And that's what I want to talk about. What I hope what we can hold together today is this sense of what a bigger vision that we share, that we hold with so many others is. And I want to start with a story about Chris and Michael. Chris and Michael are now both UU ministers. And at the time they were at some UU gathering or another, and the topic came up, one that you might be familiar with, of how hard it is to share about our faith. Might have been one of those conversations about how to give a good elevator speech, or just the discomfort of sharing that you go to church. Does anybody else feel like that, even like saying that word leaves a chalky taste in your mouth, perhaps? So Chris was saying something to such an effect, and Michael turned to him and said, "So it's your fault. It's your fault that as a gay man who grew up in a religious tradition that told me I could never be within the circle of God's love, that I didn't find this religion sooner." Boston, January 27th, 1825. It was the very first official meeting held to consider forming the American Unitarian Association. After the preliminary marks and declaration of the intention of the meeting were made, the very first recorded comments in the meeting were these, made by Reverend Dr. Bancroft of Worcester, Massachusetts. He said, "I'm fearful that we take sufficient care in the manner of instituting these meetings so proposed. I feel that Unitarianism should be propagated slowly and silently. It has always been so from the beginning with the progress of Unitarianism in this country. Unitarianism should be propagated slowly and silently." And I don't know about you, but I can't help but hear an implied, if at all, at the end of that sentiment. The very first recorded comments at our very first official meeting to consider forming an organization whose cause would presumably to spread, to propagate Unitarianism. And he may not have been the first, or he may have, but Reverend Dr. Bancroft was certainly not the last to advocate this approach to sharing the good news of our tradition. So really, it's not Chris's fault per se. Michael Tino had Reverend Dr. Bancroft to blame, and all of us who have stifled sharing the tremendous value of what we do here. So my goal, I want to be upfront today, is to convince you to become an evangelical Unitarian Universalist. And I find that easier to say over Zoom when I don't have to see how many people just got up to leave the room. And you can just hit mute if you don't want to hear anymore. To evangelize. To evangelize. You might know it means literally from the Greek to announce good news. An evangelist, a bringer of good news. And of course, for many who use that word, the good news is Jesus and the atonement theology of his death for humanity's sins. But just because that's not our good news doesn't mean we don't have good news to share, does it? A member of another congregation I serve would joke that you just have to wait for Unitarians to start talking about the last great movie they've seen, or book they've read, or restaurant they've eaten at, and you'll hear how evangelical we can be. Imagine yourself at a dinner party, wrote Forrest Church, in another era. Imagine a dinner party. They will happen again. And imagine yourself there, the only person who goes to church. When telling this little bit of information about you, it somehow inadvertently leaks out. You pique the curiosity of your companions, all of whom graduated from organized religion years ago. They want to know why. They want to know more. All of a sudden, the dinner party is in jeopardy, feeling more defensive than evangelical. You start pushing spin control buttons. Church suggests, well, really, not really church. You see, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. Well, I've always wondered about Unitarians. What do they believe? One of your dinner mates asks. And he imagines actually nothing, you sputter. Well, not really nothing, more like anything. Sensing from the half-amused, half-bewildered expressions of your companions that more of an explanation than this might prove necessary before they will let you change the subject, and worried lest anyone conclude that you harbor any silly or childish superstitions, you rush to assure them that you don't believe that Jesus was born of a virgin or resurrected on the third day. You almost never read the Bible. You certainly agree that religion is a dangerous force in the world, especially today, to which your friends gently and proudly proclaim that these are the very reasons they don't attend church. A progressive Christian preacher, Kay Northcutt is her name, was once preparing to come speak with Unitarian Universalist ministers, 500 of us gathered from across the country. She was getting ready one morning, standing at the bathroom sink, brushing her teeth in her fuzzy pink bathrobe, wondering to herself, what do I need to say to the Unitarians? And just in that moment, there was a knock on the door. She went and answered it in her pink fuzzy bathrobe, and there was a Jehovah's Witness standing there, ready to share the good news. And that particular conflagration of moments led her to ask with something like holy indignation, why has a Unitarian Universalist never knocked on my door? This tradition that saves lives, she said. This faith that brings a message of unconditional love and hope for this life to those who thought they were outside the circle of any organized religion. Why haven't you come ever knocking on my door? Now, this could be the introduction to one of a dozen Unitarian jokes. You've heard them, most of you, knocking on your door for no apparent reason, burning a question mark on the lawn. But honestly, I do believe we have a critical role to play through this inheritance we've been given of our religious tradition, a critical role to play in the healing of the world. So Forest Church invites us into a cathedral. This cathedral, he says, is as ancient as humankind. Its cornerstone, the first altar, marked with the tincture of blood and stained with tears. Search for a lifetime, which is all you are surely given, and you shall not know its limits. Visit all its transepts, worship at its myriad shrines, nor span its celestial ceiling with your gaze. The builders have worked from time immemorial, destroying and creating, confounding and perfecting, tearing down and raising up arches in this cathedral, buttresses and chapels, organs and theaters, chancels and transepts, gargoyles, idols, and icons. Not a moment passes without work beginning that shall not be finished in the lifetime of the architects who planned it, the patrons who paid for it, the builders who constructed, or the expectant worshipers. Throughout human history, one generation after another has labored lovingly, sometimes fearfully, crafting memorials and consecrating shrines. Untold numbers of these collect dust in long, undisturbed chambers. Others lie shattered in shards or ground into powder on the cathedral floor. Not a moment passes without the dreams of long-dead dreamers being outstripped, shattered, or abandoned, giving way to new visions, each immortal in reach, ephemeral in grasp. Welcome to the cathedral of the world. Do you know this vision? Above all else, he invites us to contemplate the windows. In the cathedral of the world, there are windows without number, some long forgotten, covered with many patinas of grime, others revered by millions, the most sacred of shrines. Each, in its own way, is beautiful. Some are abstract, others representational, some dark and meditative, others bright and dazzling. Each window tells a story about the creation of the world, the meaning of history, the purpose of life, the nature of humankind, the mystery of death. The windows of the cathedral are where the light shines through. This metaphor, this is Unitarian Universalism. One light, the one light of our Unitarian foundation, the oneness of creation, of all being, shines through many windows, the universalist understanding of all-inclusive love. One light shining through many windows, illuminating minds and hearts in many different ways. And church says, in our congregations, we honor this truth by encouraging our members to reflect on the light through whatever set of windows they find most illuminating. Whatever set of windows you find most illuminating, we only require that this same freedom be honored for others. This is our truth. A healing truth that the broken places in our country and in our world are calling for. In every tradition, every culture, every person, there is beauty and wisdom. Those with whom we most vigorously disagree, we yet refuse to demonize. We put faith in the inherent worth and dignity. We put faith that whatever they know about God, about the ultimate nature of reality, even if it doesn't make any sense to us, that somehow they too hold a piece of the truth. This truth of ours calls us to humility, to bow before those many windows, bow in the face of mystery, bow to the other who thinks so differently, acknowledging in reverence that whatever light we have seen, it shines just as brightly on them. The cathedral of the world invites us to gather as we did with our youth in the courtyard yesterday, to tell stories of Diwali, to light candles and approach with curiosity, humility, to learn about and honor a tradition that over 1 billion people are celebrating right now, a holy new year, a celebration of light amidst the darkness. And yes, the cathedral of the world asks us to wonder with humility about 71 million fellow citizens who voted to re-elect Donald Trump. To wonder with humility about the truth they hold, however obscured by lies and hateful rhetoric. But our truth doesn't end with this humility. We only require that this same freedom be honored for others. This is our faith that because we all hold a piece of the truth, because we are all illuminated by the same light, because every one of us, all beings, are born into this cathedral of the world, the ideologies that hold there is one and only one path, to God, to love, to salvation. These ideologies are hollow and bankrupt. That white supremacy and xenophobia, misogyny and heteropatriarchy, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, these ways of thinking that live in so many places, in so many institutions, and even, yes, within us, that these have no place in the cathedral of the world. This is our conviction. Many windows, one light. We need not think alike to love alike. And here's the ironic but honest truth. Don't you wish everyone thought like that? We need not think alike to love alike. Don't you wish everyone thought like that? Don't you wish everyone honored the other with curiosity and respect? Don't you wish we could convert the world to Unitarian Universalism? Now, I've got my tongue firmly in my cheek for those who don't know me well, but there's a kernel of truth here too. We have a vision of world community, and it is good and right to spread this vision with conviction. I don't want everyone in the world to call themselves Unitarian Universalists, to worship like us, or organize their committee meetings like we do, or start lighting chalices all the time or anything, but I want the whole world to approach beliefs different than one's own the way we aspire to. I want the whole world to look around and see in our differences and diversity the cathedral of the world. The poet and prophet Audre Lorde said, "It is not our differences that divide us. It's not the differences. It's our ability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." This is a path that requires of us both humility and conviction. To practice humility and conviction at once. It makes me think of this saying, this motto from our Unitarian cousins in Transylvania, one that became a bedrock of their faith through decades when it was illegal to practice it: be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. Humility and conviction, wise as serpents and gentle as doves. It is not an easy path, but I believe it's the path we are called to as our part of helping to heal the world. When I was in Rochester, New York, a friend, Katie Jo Sutterby, a Baptist minister, she preached at the annual Interfaith Thanksgiving service there. It's the longest running Interfaith Thanksgiving service. She shared a bit about her spiritual journey from her youth as a fundamentalist to becoming an American Baptist minister, not the scary kind of Baptist, she likes to say. She said, "I'm a liberal not because I have no standards, but because I've learned about compersion. Compersion," she said, "is witnessing someone else's pleasure and enjoying it. Not in a creepy way. It's the opposite of aversion. So when I walked down the hall of my middle school, being the makeout police, that was a sign of my aversion," she said. "But the opposite of that is that moment in a wedding, the kiss. When the officiant says, 'You may kiss the bride,' everyone in the audience leans in and is silent. For those seconds, everyone in the room is enjoying the show of love between the couple. That's compersion." Compersion, that experience of enjoying someone else experiencing pleasure. There's another one of those old Unitarian jokes about why we have a hard time singing, especially singing hymns in parts. We don't do it because we're too busy looking ahead to see whether or not we agree with the words. And I know that some do cringe every time that G word pops up in a hymn, every time there's a whiff of prayer in a service. Or it might not be theological. It might just be that piece of contemporary music feels so out of place, or you can't stand to hear one more classical choral arrangement by a dead white guy. There are countless opportunities to be irritated at church. So here's an alternative. Practice compersion. Anytime something happens in a worship service that you don't enjoy is an opportunity to remember that it is feeding someone else here, that another member of your community, somebody you probably love and care about, but at the very least have covenanted to be part of a beloved community with. That another member of your community is being nourished by the very thing that's making you uncomfortable. Practice enjoying their pleasure. Be nourished by their being nourished, for we worship here in the cathedral of the world, celebrating many windows and the one light of our inescapable interdependence. Practice here so we can go live it out there. Keep the faith here so we may spread it far and wide. You are Unitarian Universalists, and you've inherited the sacred calling to proclaim the truth of our tradition. We need not think alike to love alike. May our religion be like sunshine and go everywhere. Celebrate our differences. This is the holy promise of our faith. This is the great quest our spiritual ancestors have laid before us, and which we have the privilege of carrying on. Because inclusive community, beloved community, it's not about making sure I feel comfortable and don't get my buttons pushed. It's about making sure there's room for another to come sit next to me, even if, especially if they make me uncomfortable. Beloved community, it's about the awesome grace, the unlikely blessing of being part of a religious tradition, of a spiritual community, or of that thing I do on Sunday morning with such a big tent that we don't even agree on the words we use to describe it. Truly, this is not an easy path, but it is the healing our wounded world needs. You are lucky enough to have found one of the mere handfuls of community in the world where atheists and theists, crazy new agey mystics and hard-nosed, tough-minded rationalists gather, see one another eye to eye, break bread together in the same humble cathedral, and call themselves one people. Ain't that good news? Ain't that the very good news that a confused and broken world, a people torn apart by religious shame and violence in the name of God, a people whose realities seem to be drifting further and further apart, ain't that just the good news that needs to be spread? And who is going to proclaim it if not you? Who is going to proclaim it if not you? May it be so. Amen, and blessed be